Ahoy, my friends, and welcome aboard. We're going to have some fun today exploring South and Central America with the Brownwood Birders and Carefree Birding. We're going to visit some great places. We're going to go to Grand Cayman, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Mexico, and even do birding while we're at sea on board our ship. The original presentation was given to the Brownwood Birders Club of the Villages on June 11th, 2024. I'm going to be your guide today, but also I want you to know that we had a dozen Brownwood birders on board this very fascinating cruise. Here's a quick look at our itinerary, and I wanted to tell you how uh, Carefree Birding works. One of our members, Linda Bell, and her husband had done several Carefree Birding cruises, and she approached me and said, do you think the Brownwood Birders would like to go on this? And I said, oh, sure, that would be great. I love the cruise, and I think we probably have members that like the cruise as well. So Carefree Birding is owned by, I'm going to call them Carefree Linda and Carefree Ken. At each port of call, they set up a birding excursion with the local guides, and they have transportation arranged. So Carefree Lynn and Ken, accompany us while on board, as well as on each of our excursions as we go ashore. Somehow they always manage to get us in the front of the line so we could be first off the ship, which was great for birders. And we met the local guides usually right at the pier, anywhere from 2 to 4. It was really a well thought out plan when we had all these people together. And most of our excursions were about 4 to 7 hours. And generally we had anywhere from 2 to 4 locations that we would visit each day. We're going to see lots of birds today. We logged about 212 different species for the trip, and I took over 3,500 photos. But hey, don't worry, I've pared it way down. We're not going to have to look at all 3,500. We should complete this cruise in about another 40 minutes. Before we get started on our journey, here are a couple things about me and my background for those of you who don't know me. I always tell people my life is about things with wings, like birds and butterflies and dragonflies and airplanes. So I was brought up in Southeast Pennsylvania, and my home was adjoining an arboretum. So I got interested in birding pretty early. I became a Boy Scout and earned the Bird Study Merit Badge right there in Southeast Pennsylvania. It's a lot of fun, and I love birding, but I had to earn a living. So fortunately, I was lucky enough to fly things with wings for the U.S. Navy. I always liked cameras, and photography seemed to mesh pretty well with birding, which was great. I love doing it. I'm a member of several birding clubs as well as several photography clubs. Since moving to Florida from New England, I've been taking photos of lots of different wing things. Now, here are a few of these beautiful dragonflies. So you can see on the 3 photos on the right, we're from Argia. It's an online digital magazine that the Dragonfly Society of the Americas puts out. I believe it's quarterly, but this is it's a great honor to get on their front covers or back covers. And on the left are a few other dragonflies that were lucky. Well, I was lucky enough to have them in Trail Traveler, another digital magazine by the Rails to Trails people. And here are a few ribbon winners from the Florida Camera Council Club and the Photographic Society of the Americas, you can see in the bottom left. And for those of you who live in the villages, you may recognize up in the left-hand corner, that's the Birds of the Villages, a project that I have personally been involved in for a couple of years now. And we distributed about 3,000 of these laminated fold-out guides to people who live in the villages. Okay, well, let's go cruising. We embarked at nearby Tampa. It was a very convenient port for everybody. It's just about an hour from the villages. The port has easy parking, and the check-in is seamless too. It's a piece of cake. When we got to our staterooms, the Carefree Ken and Linda had already dropped off a nice packet for each of the birders in the stateroom, and it showed our calendar, all the birding excursion, all the events, our times, what we were doing on board. We had meetings prior usually to going on the excursions, and it was and they also included a checklist for each of the likely birds we could see in the port. Our first meeting was at 4 p.m. on the day that we sailed from Tampa. Of course, we were gathered on the 10th deck to do a little birding from the rail. The departure from Tampa is very cool. We sailed down Tampa Bay for about an hour till we got to the Gulf of Mexico. Along the way, we had a chance to see many species, and here's a very partial checklist. And we saw these birds from the 10th deck. And it included a peregrine falcon, which was really cool at the port. It was hanging out around the buildings, and it was flying in and out. So that was great. And one of my favorites is always the reddish egret, who was hunting along the shoreline as we made our way out to the Gulf of Mexico. It was a good way to get the group going. We had a relaxing day at sea with several meetings where Carefree Ken and Linda briefed us on all of what we might see at Grand Cayman and how we were going to go and who our guides were. And they gave us a slideshow on the likely birds we were going to see, which was very helpful since most of us don't have a lot of time birding in Cayman Islands. So you can see where the Caymans are. It's south of Cuba and also northwest of Jamaica. Grand Cayman's the largest of the three islands there. For experienced cruisers, you may know that not every port will have a pier where the large cruise ships can tie up. So they do what they call tendering. And here we are tendering ashore at Grand Cayman. It's our only tender port on the entire trip, but it's a great way to start off. And you can see that it was a lot of fun. You can see the smiling faces there too. I thought it was pretty cool. I loved it. We had 3 birding stops scheduled for the day. Our primary spot was the Queen Elizabeth II Botanic Park. And we were going to spend about 3 or 4 hours there birding. It was a great place. Birding started as soon as we hit the ground in the parking lot. And I had 4 lifers before I actually got into the park. But on the way over to the park, we made one quick stop because we wanted to have a chance to see the white-tailed tropic bird. And sure enough, there were about 6 of them flying just offshore. It was a bit too far for my 500 millimeter lens, but I didn't want you to miss this spectacular bird. So I've taken the liberty of adding a bird from eBird so you can see it there in the upper left-hand corner. And when I do that in this presentation, which I've done about 4 or 5 times of the birds that I didn't take a photo of, I will try to put attribution so you can see that this came from eBird. On each slide, I've also tried to add a range map for each species so you can see where they are. I've also, in the case of any birds that are from the International Union of Conservation of Nature scale, if they're in the near threatened or lower category, I've added that too. And it can go all the way to the extinct, which certainly not going to see extinct in the wild. And then they have the 3 threatened categories in the center there. So let's take a look at these. These 3 were also lifers for me. That Grand Cayman bullfinch is pretty much endemic to this area, so it was very nice to see. Well, we were warned before we started our walk at the Botanic Park that the Caribbean dove was very secretive and usually stayed in the background, and it could be hard to find. Well, just as we stepped into the garden, here comes one walking across the pavers near the gift shop. Oh, go figure. I did like its plumage. It's beautiful. Now, the one on the right is the Zenata dove, which is also a relative of the same genus as our mourning doves, which are very common here in Florida, and the white-winged dove. So it's both beautiful, and I really enjoyed seeing both of them. This is the beautiful bananaquit. It's believed that the early settlers derived the name from the yellow color like a banana and the English word quit, which means small passerines of tropical America. It's a beautiful bird. I love seeing it. And this subspecies is only found on Grand Cayman. That is the Cayman parrot, the national bird of Grand Cayman Islands. We found this pair. They were happily feeding in a very small tree. We had excellent views. We tried to remain a respectable distance, and they continued to eat and carry on. We watched them for about 15 minutes, and they were still there when we left. It was a beautiful, um, fun, really, start to being here on the Botanic Park. Okay, having a little trouble advancing the slide, so please bear with me. Well, here's the West Indian woodpecker, and they're on the left. And I just decided I'd add the uh, red-bellied woodpecker that we have here in Florida, so that people could compare them. They look very very similar. Now that West Indian woodpecker has that yellowish olive color to it, so you can distinguish them, but both beautiful birds. And the local species, uh, they are endemic and found only on the Cayman Islands and nowhere else in the world. The western spindalis we found was a bit shy. Its range is mostly in the islands, but there are reports that it can be found in southern Florida, usually in the southeast. And I would guess that some of the people watching this have that opportunity to see the western spindalis in southeast Florida. I had never seen it before, and I was very happy to see it here. Well, I had to throw in a white-winged dove because we did see many of them, and I know we get them in Florida, but I just included this one. Well, these sightings were lots of fun. We had walking past this loggerhead kingbird who was just sitting on a branch. It would turn one way, turn another, but it gave all the photographers an excellent opportunity to get a picture of this very cooperative loggerhead kingbird. So then we walked to the end of our outbound trail, and they had some picnic benches. We sat down to have a little rest, drink some water, and munch a granola bar. And then all of a sudden, the flicker popped out of the brush. It's a pretty heavy brush. And then the Vitoline warbler came out too. This was one of the top target birds of the day. Everybody hopped up, went over to see it. It stayed out for about 30 seconds. I was very happy to get a few shots of it. You can see it's very tiny, but it was the star of the day for me, and I really enjoyed it. There's 3 subspecies of this Vitoline warbler, and Grand Cayman has its own subspecies. It's a very small population, and the other ones are on the other Cayman Islands and Swan Island, but nowhere else. Beautiful bird. Not everything has wings, and most of us thought this was interesting. It is the blue iguana. It's an endangered species of lizard, and it's endemic only to Grand Cayman Island. Back in 2003, it was estimated that there were only 15 left remaining in the wild. Only 15. Well, through some very, very good conservation work by several conservation groups there on Grand Cayman, they've been able to reintroduce some of these blue iguanas back into the population. They're still trying to reach 1,000, but they have gotten it up. Last counts is somewhere close to 750. Here's the gang having fun and really enjoying this beautiful park. Lots of birds, great trails, and even a few places that we could rest. Ooh, that's the West Indian whistling duck. It's a beautiful species. We really enjoyed it. This was a special location that our guides had arranged with the owner that was here. Usually people can't get in here, but through the special arrangement, we got in here to see this one extra species. I personally like the black-bellied whistling ducks that we have, but this is one of the largest ones. At least the call I like better, but these are beautiful. It's one of the largest of the whistling ducks. That's enough. This is it's not a complete list of the species. that we saw, but it's a partial list, and we saw 36 different species while we were on Grand Cayman. So it was really good. Anybody, if you really want a full list of everything that we see, you can contact me and I'll be able to give it to you. One of the nice things that Carefree Linda did after we uh, compared our notes, she would put email out for anybody that would like to download it from eBird to add to their list. So that worked well. Well, here's the Grand Cayman. It was truly way more than I expected, and thanks to Brownwood Birders, Karen and Stefano, for taking this nice photo on the left of a relaxing spot that they found with the cruise ship in the background. Well, welcome to South America and Cartagena. Yes, we went all the way to South America on a cruise ship. And remember, that's about the same speed that your golf cart can travel. So it was a long trip, but it was well worth it. We're going to have a great time here. One of the things I always recommend to people on cruises is to get up early, get on deck, see that sunrise. It's always amazing. And particularly if you're going into a place like Cartagena, Colombia, where you pass many fortresses on the way in, and there's birds flying all over, and you can see them. You're very close to the shoreline in many spots. It's really a great way to start. Yes, that is the northern screamer, and I'm pretty sure you know how it got its name. We were on our way to our first destination of the day when our birding guide, Pilar, told the bus driver, pull over, pull over. She saw these northern screamers out in the field there. And so it was a great stop, and it chalked up another lifer for me. And I'm guessing for most of the birders, it was a lifer too. A really good find. Well, this is our primary stop of the day. It's a palm oil plantation, but it also doubles as a very small eco lodge. It's a beautiful place. Now, we didn't have a chance to use the pool, but we did enjoy the other facilities. Thoroughly enjoyable stop here. I'm going to show you some of the things that we saw. Colombia has been experiencing, or had been experiencing, a drought while we were down there. We were there in the dry season and toward the end of it. But the birds were still very active, and many of the ponds and wetland areas were attracting many species that were congregating to the remaining water. So, do you see those black spots out there in the water? Yep, those are water buffalo cooling off. It was an extremely hot day. That's the striped-backed wren. That's the bicolored wren. These two wrens are truly amazing. I've never seen this large a wren before, and they were very loud. In fact, the bicolored wren is the largest wren in South America. And, I just had to circle a couple of them because if you look at the camo, they can be pretty hard to spot. Well, Carefree Ken had shared that he had never seen the pale-legged hornero, as you can see there in the upper left there. It's a beautiful bird. We managed to get a few photos of it. We also can see down below how sometimes hard they are to spot. Well, fortunately, I got to see it, but Ken was nowhere to be found at this point, and so his streak of not seeing it is still active. And I can't believe he misses as many times as he's been down there to South America. So on the right is the red-crowned woodpecker. It's a medium-sized woodpecker, and it can be found in pretty much Costa Rica down to the northern parts of South America. The wattle jacanas. This is a really nice nice bird. There's the adults and the juveniles here. So you can see the adults are in the darker plumage. They really, both the juveniles and the adults reminded me of the gallinals that you see back here in Florida, and also the coots. Yeah, but they were, actually, we had a great time watching them. Lots of fun to see them. This was really cool too. The black-collared hawk, it was just hanging out. It stayed on this branch. It was a fairly good distance away, but it stayed here uh, at least a half hour that we were there. Its presence is all the way from Mexico to Uruguay, and it lives mostly on a diet of fish. Now, down there on the right side, you can see that southern lapwing. What a beautiful bird with that, with the coloring. I love its red eye. It can be found in urban and agricultural areas like we were in, but it can pose a threat to the air traffic safety when it's around airports and stuff like that. So it's a beautiful bird. Love seeing it. We were going to see them in a couple of places on our trip. And up in the right-hand corner, I know you can tell that's an ibis, but this one's a bare-faced ibis. And yes, it was a new bird for me. All the herons we saw were terrific, but this rufescent tiger heron is one of my favorites. I thought it was a bit comical in that bottom left slide when the Western cattle eager came riding in on the water buffalo in the same frame as the tiger heron. The capped heron was one of my favorites also. I got a lot of favorites, but anyway, this really is one of my favorites. And you know that it's a special bird when our guides Pilar and Carefree Linda had trouble even getting the words out of their mouth. They sort of stuttered for about 10 seconds before they could say capped heron. It's a beautiful bird, as you can see. I just love that plumage, particularly the blues and the little bit of yellow and black on its head. If you look at that photo down in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to be able to see the capped heron, but you're also going to see how closely packed some of these birds were. You'll see the snail kite in that tree, the bare-faced ibis is there too, the great egret, and a couple of the jacanas as well. We'd been out in the sun for a couple of hours, so this was a very much appreciated rest that we had. And I'll mention some of during our hike, Pilar's assistant carried a very large, well, it was a styrofoam cooler. It was full of ice and a case of water, and he carried it. And anytime we needed one, we had ice cold water for us on our walk. It was very difficult to stay hydrated, and this was a lifesaver. A few of the Brownwood Birders enjoyed plates of the fresh fruit they had put out and a few of the protein bars. All the while, this ruddy ground dove was up in the rafters, just sort of looking over us, behaving, and was quiet the whole time. Didn't seem to care. Well, we aren't quite finished here yet, but here are a few of the. You can see a couple of the tyrants here. There's a yellow-chinned spine-tail, a beautiful yellow oriole in the middle. They were all great, and enjoyed seeing them. And in this photo, I'm sure you're thinking when you're reading that yellow-hooded blackbirds that these look a lot like yellow-headed blackbirds. Well, that's correct. They look a lot like it, but this is a totally different species. I did throw one of the yellow-headed blackbirds into the bottom left corner of the slide so you can see that really the only difference is, the main difference, I'll say, is that white stripe on its wing that you can see there on the yellow-headed. But these yellow-hooded blackbirds were very active. They were flying in and out, up and down, and there was a fair number of them. So we're going to say goodbye to the palm oil plantation now and start our police escort to our next birding area. Yes, I said police escort, and we were looking for another lifer, the Kakoi heron. It required us to stop along a road to see it in the wetlands where it usually is. Pilar always gets a police escort for traffic control, but also to keep maybe a stray gang away from bothering the American tourists with their high-priced binoculars and cameras. What can I say? We're not in Kansas anymore, but just so you know, we had absolutely no issues on the entire trip. I always felt safe, and I think everybody else did. So this really wasn't a problem, but it was nice that Pilar took that precaution. After a long day of birding, it was very nice to see that they actually have a shuttle bus that takes you along the pier. Sometimes the piers can be very long, and we had walked a long way, plus it was very hot. We had 2 days in Colombia. This is the next day. To get a feel for Cartagena, we had a half-day tour of the old city. It was a wonderful guided tour, and it's our guide under the umbrella there. But she always reminded us about 3 or 4 times that Shakira, the queen of Latin music, was born in Colombia. Well, we saw the yellow-headed caracara at several locations during our trip. The one on the right was actually just sitting in the downtown areas, walking along a back street. It was just sitting up there, and I always like to refer to the caracaras and some of the other birds as nature's cleanup crew. Much of their diet includes carrion, but they also eat some other rather disgusting things too. After our city tour, we visited a local park. It was full of birds. I particularly like the boat-billed flycatchers that you can see here. Uh, the other ones were nice to see too, but the flycatcher was my favorite. These are the orange-chinned parakeets, very numerous all over the park. Certainly you can hear them, they're very gregarious. They make noise quite a bit. They like to stay up toward the top of the canopy. Here are a few photos from the city. You can see we got an early start. There's not many people out. I just love the colors, how colorful the flowers and the doors and the streets are. Speaking of doors, here are a few, and they're all very fascinating. And just a few more shots. You can see the huge fortress that did protect them for many a year. So lots of interesting things to see here. Walking back to the ship, we needed to walk through an area set up to attract birds and tourists because you had to go through the souvenir shop. But this is a little Timamu, and it was just sitting peacefully in a dark area, actually a very dark area. I had to lighten this photo up quite a bit. And in the field, it can be difficult to find by sight, and often it's detected by sound more often. The macaws are really attracted to this area. Their number here was probably about 30 at least, I would think. They were flying all around. And it's all due to the food that they put out for them. So they're here for the free meal. They're not caged, but they still can be enjoyable to see. We had a great time at Cartagena, Colombia. We saw 80 species. You can see a few of them here. It's only a partial list. So farewell, Cartagena. We are now arriving in Panama. Yeah, officially in Central America too. So back in 1903, the United States backed Panama to secede from Colombia, who were previously a part of, to allow the construction of the Panama Canal. So that was the first canal. And as you know, probably know that back in 1999, at the end of that year, the U.S. gave Panama complete rights over all the canals there. And so the United States is fully out of there now. At our first stop, there were dozens of species, and we had 3 guides, and they were all pointing at different species all over. So it was hard to keep up with them, but it was still lots of fun. And I particularly enjoyed these rose-breasted grosbeaks that were just right above us. There were a couple of them there eating the fruit and the berries that were on the trees, and I think everybody did enjoy seeing them. Well, this is the social flycatcher. We saw this flycatcher in multiple locations, and it looks a lot like a mini version of the boat-billed flycatcher that we just saw a few minutes ago, but certainly with a smaller bill. To me, hummingbirds are amazing. Here's the rufous-tailed hummingbird. The one on the right is incubating eggs. It's tucked under a palm frond, and it was very difficult to see, but it's really special. I mean, this hummingbird is about 3.5 to 4 inches, and weighs in at an amazing 0.18 ounces. We did see these both in Panama and Costa Rica. Beautiful bird. This is the white-necked jacobin. It's also this is one of the larger hummingbirds, and we saw these in Panama, and they were quite active. A lot of fun to see. Well, this is the green honey creeper, and we were birding along the canal, and it looked like we were on an old military base, and lots of old base housing was there, and some of it was being restored. So we stopped at our guide's house. It was being restored, and right across from him there was another house. The neighbor told us that she had found this green honey creeper after it flew into the side of her house. It was on the ground, and it was stunned. So she returned it to this tree. So we watched it for about 30 minutes, got some nice photos, and then it finally did recover enough to fly away. Well, don't you like it when the call describes the bird's name? This is the whooping mott-mott. It's always on my target list. I really was very, very happy to see it. They're characteristically will just perch for about 15, 20 minutes on one spot, and then they will swing their tail left and right. It just reminded me of a perfect metronome. It was very nice, and I really enjoyed seeing it. Here's a short break for a group photo. There's a couple of our guides on the far right that you can see there. It was nice. We had a really good time at this location. We did go to another location that day. It's one of the national parks. Actually, it was sort of late in the day, and the birding was, pretty spotty. But we even though we didn't see too many birds here, we did see this. Well, that howler monkey was swinging through the branches of one of the trees there that we could see. It was pretty cool, and this is one of the ones you can hear them. You want to if you want to see them, that's when you know to start searching. Well, you can see that it's also evaluated into the threatened category now as well. One of the other interesting rodents that we saw there is this lesser capybara. And even though it's the lesser capybara, it's slightly smaller than the greater capybara. It still is a rodent that can grow to 3 feet long and weigh up to 62 pounds. Oh boy, no complaints that they are staying in Central and South America. We certainly don't need anything else like this in Florida. We had a very successful trip to Panama. Here's a few of the species that we saw. Oh, so colorful and very nice. So on to spectacular Costa Rica. Of course, Costa Rica means rich coast. And here we are, we're tied up to the pier. You can see us just walking off for another early start of birding in one of the best places you can bird ever, Costa Rica. Well, we saw all of these species in Costa Rica. Okay, here's a little challenge for you. One of them is the national bird of Costa Rica. See if you can pick it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Yep, this mostly dull brown clay color thrush is the national bird of Costa Rica. This sort of reminds me of our Florida choice for state bird, the northern mockingbird, with the beautiful dull gray and black and white plumage. The fact is, I do enjoy seeing both of these birds, but certainly there's a lot of spectacular choices that people could have made for their country and state. Here's a few of my favorites. I think one of my favorites here at this stop was also the streak-headed wood creeper that you can see on the left. I love the coloring of it. And of course, we did see the buff-throated saltator and the black-cheeked woodpeckers as well. Now, let's look at a few tanagers. In the upper left, you can spot 2 blue-gray tanagers, and between them is the golden-headed tanager. Well, let's take a little closer look. This blue-gray tanager with the shades of blue, I think it's always a winner. I just love seeing them. Of course, the golden-hooded tanager is magnificent too, and we're not going to find any of these guys in Florida. If you want to see these, you're going to have to go south. We saw quite a few of these scarlet rump tanagers, and for those of you that have been around for a while, you probably remember that this used to be called Passerini's tanager, and at one point they separated it into Passerini's tanager and the cherry tanager. So originally it was a scarlet rump, but then they changed the names. But back in 2018, they decided they had enough of the cherries and Passerini's, and they lumped them back into one species again. And of course, they renamed it the scarlet rump tanager. It's a beautiful bird. A little duller, but the palm tanager, I think, is still a beauty and always fun to see. Subtle colors that it has. Yep, that's the summer tanager. We have them here in Florida, and I'm still pretty sure that if you saw one in Central America, you would stop to take a look. They're just beautiful. Here are a few of the mostly black birds. Up in there on the left, you can see that groove-billed Annie. We had seen the other two species as well, the greater Annie and the smooth-billed Annie. They look a lot alike, but you also see the variable seed eater here, and that black-cowled oriole is certainly a star. Well, there's more than birds, of course, and down in that right-hand corner, you'll see the blue jeans poisonous dart frog. Yeah, it's about the size of a quarter. And of course, yes, we saw several sloths just hanging around. I'm sorry, had to do that. It's the slowest mammal alive. So many interesting facts about its digestive system, but I'm not going into those. If you want to do it, that's on your own. Well, I took these photos of the swallowtail kite back in Florida, but I wanted to tell you a story about one of the most spectacular sightings I've seen. While we were birding along the Costa Rican dirt road, somebody said, look up. So about maybe 500 feet above us, there were up to about 100 of these swallowtail kites all flying northward on their way back to their summer residence, which is many of them will be coming to Florida. And they already are here. I've seen them now that it's June, they're back here. But it just reminded me of seeing so many of them and that where they have to migrate. Most of them will start down in southern Brazil and northern Argentina, and they have to fly all the way up across that continent into Central America. And when they get up around the Yucatan, many of them will take off and they fly across the Gulf of Mexico. Just an incredibly amazing journey, certainly perilous for them, but this was certainly one of the most fun things that I did see. And I wish I'd gotten some better pictures of it, but I hope you enjoy these from Florida. Here are a few more flycatchers, the gray-capped flycatcher posed very nicely for us even. Selected a branch that had a few colorful leaves for us. On the left, you'll see the yellow-bellied flycatcher. And even though it does come up into the United States and migrates through many of the United States and up to Canada and northern United States, I don't think I've ever seen one, so I was very happy to see it. That is Montezuma's oripendula. It has one of the most unique and distinctive calls you'll hear from any bird in the world. And we did see quite a few of these guys flying around. Well, here's a few more sightings that we saw. The collared aracari on the right, the pale-vented pigeon on the left. And this was pretty cool to see it. Certainly, I'm not even sure I knew the name before we got here. The masked tatara, very nice, good view. And we did make it out to the beach of the Caribbean Sea, and we did see a whimbrel walking out there, foraging and hunting for something. The whimbrels occur on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. Well, here's Donna on the left making her best impression of the Carefree Birding with the binoculars in one hand and the Fanta orange in the other. And in the center is one of our guides. He's now taking over from his father. This guide is named Kevin. He is amazing. He is so sharp. He just gets a quick glimpse. He knows what all these birds are. He can take his scope and put it on a bird in less than 15 seconds and give everybody a chance to see it. It's amazing. And over on the right, you can see we were dodging a few puddles, but believe it or not, we didn't have any rain on us for our entire trip here or any of the other excursions as well. So it was great. We drove back to the port, and Kevin, our guide, wanted to show us one more thing. The black and white owl was in a park right at the cruise port area. So we hopped out. He found it. He put his scope on the bird, and if you look at the photo on the right, that's a cell phone photo held up to the scope, and pretty amazing shot. It was a big day with lots of species seen. Here's a partial list. Costa Rica is always so much fun. But we need to move onward. Well, say hola to Cozumel. We're out on the Yucatan Peninsula now. Naturally, we had a nice early start, and we departed the ship and enjoying the sunrise as it's coming up. This is a very unique ride for the day, our transportation. But I really enjoyed this one as much as air-conditioned buses, to tell you the truth. It had lots of room and plenty of fresh air, and the rolled-up sides certainly reminded me of my golf cart back in Florida. It was fun. This species is endemic to the Yucatan. It's a black catbird. Its range is it's very small, obviously. And its populations are, depending on which estimate you read, they're either near threatened or in the least concerned category. So certainly threatened by habitat loss, just like most species are now. The Yucatan vireo, it's very closely related to the red-eyed vireos that we see, and it's enjoying a little fruit just like the black catbird. That's the Couch's kingbird. That's the tropical kingbird. Can you hear the difference? Well, the sound is the best way to identify these two kingbirds. If you don't hear them, it's very, very difficult, and even experts have a hard time telling them apart visually in the field. So listen carefully when you're out looking for these kingbirds, and I think you'll really enjoy seeing them. This is the Caribbean Elena. It's sort of drab, but it is a pretty bird, and you can see it's got that two-tone bill, which I sort of liked, and it's very helpful for the identification. And the white-crowned pigeon, you can see it's in that near threatened category. But what I really liked, and showing you this, is the Audubon drawing on the right. It was amazing. Here's the white-fronted parrot. We did get a nice view of this parrot as well. Unfortunately, in my estimation, these parrots have fallen into the parrot trade, and many of them can live up to 50 years in captivity. They're very noisy, so you don't want to have them too close to your neighbors either, I guess. It's a Yucatan woodpecker. It's endemic to Central America, just this very small range out here on the Yucatan Peninsula, and just a couple of the islands that are very, very close. Another hummingbird is the green-breasted mango. It's 4.5 inches long and weighs in at just about 0.2 ounces. I love the name mango. That's great. We had a fun day in Cozumel. Here's another partial list of some of the birds that we saw. We say adios to Cozumel. And we're going to get underway and show you a few of the birds that we saw from the rail while we were birding in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. Down on the right, that's me trying to get a few photos. Well, here's the little background on this photo. One of the other birders was up above there, and she managed to snap some of me out here getting a photo. But this was about dinner time. Donna and I were getting ready to go to dinner, and Carefree Linda has a system set up to alert birders of any birds that are around the ship. So just as we were getting ready to go out, the telephone rings, and I answer the telephone, and Carefree Linda says, "Starboard side, brown boobies, midship." I said, "Look at Donna," and she hangs up, calls the next person. So I looked at Donna, and I said, "I'm going to go get a few more photos." And Donna looks at me and says, "Doesn't Carefree Linda ever rest?" Well, the obvious answer is no, she never does rest. And she is always ABB, always be birding. She is definitely very good. Well, we did see the brown boobies. They were the most frequent birds that we did see along the ship. And we very often could see them. They fly up and down the sides of the ship, as do the red-footed boobies, although we did not see quite as many of these. And this was very interesting. This was sort of like a sea battle. This day we had hundreds, if not thousands, of flying fish just hopping out of the water in the wake of our ship, and the brown boobies were flying up and down, dozens of them, diving into the water, capturing them. Now, if you look at this one, you're going to see that the bird in the air is actually a magnificent frigate bird. And remember, their wingspan can be up to 7 to 8 feet wide. They can hunt on their own, obviously, but these frigate birds thought it might be easier if I just snatched the fish from the booby. And so it was a struggle, but I guess it paid off a few times for them. Each night we had 2 tables reserved in the main dining room for our group, and it doesn't mean that you can't go to the specialty restaurants if you'd like to, but this was truly one of the best parts of our cruise, when we got to relax and get to know the other Brownwood birders much better. And what you really find out is just how incredibly amazing and fascinating these other Brownwood birders are. And I loved it. It was one of the best parts of the day. So I'm going to say goodbye to our little trip here, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I do want to just show you 1 or 2 other slides here, and I'll just talk about this very briefly. So who wants to go cruising? Well, we have arranged for our next cruise in March of 2026, and it's going to be an exclusive cruise just for the Brownwood birders. So as you remember, I did give this presentation to the Brownwood birders on June 11th of 2024, and Carefree Birding can only take 20 birders to keep the size reasonable, so we can get in those buses and go out and not have too many people. So it's limited to 20 people. If you didn't sign up, it is now wait-listed only. If you think you would like to go on this, you can go to the Carefree Birding site. It's carefreebirding.com. Follow the instructions there. Go to the March 16, 2026 cruise. Send in your paperwork. You'll be put on to the waiting list. And if something does become available, and there's probably a good chance that there will be a couple spaces that will change, because we are looking out there quite a ways into the future now. If you have questions, you can always call me. If you have questions that Carefree Linda would be able to answer, the phone number on this slide is the one you should try. So anyway, I'm glad we filled the cruise up quickly. I did give a lot more information about it, but if you want more detail at our regular meeting, but if you want more details, you can get a hold of me or Carefree Linda, and you can get more details. And if you have any thought of going, I would suggest just get on the waiting list. And there's no deposit you have to put down until you're ready to go, and that deposit's going to be fully refundable, even if you are signed up to go. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to say farewell and happy birding to everybody.